The Economic Club of Minnesota's mission is to provide a world-class, nonpartisan forum for national and international leaders in business and public policy to discuss ideas that affect how Minnesota can better compete in the global economy. The Economic Club of Minnesota, engaging the world, strengthening Minnesota.
To introduce our panel, I'd like to bring up Richard Davis, retired CEO of U.S. Bank, well known to this club, as well as one of the co-chairs for the Super Bowl committee. Please welcome Richard Davis.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Economic Club. It's indeed a pleasure to be here, and you're in for a big treat today. As one of the co-chairs of the Minnesota Super Bowl, it's my pleasure to talk a little bit about what's going to happen in 81 days, and then introduce you to our very distinguished panel. The co-chair that joined me on this is Doug Baker, who you'll hear from in a moment, and Marilyn Carlson Nelson, who is away today waiting for the results of the Expo 2023. So she cannot be here today, but the three of us would otherwise be sharing the podium to introduce these fine guests. So here's your first trivia lesson. When was the first Super Bowl played? What year? You might be wrong because you've got to add inclusive. January of 1967, the Kansas City Chiefs played the Green Bay Packers. And I won't tell you who won because I just can't say it. 52 years later, on February 4th, 2018, Super Bowl 52 will be hosted here in Minnesota at the U.S. Bank Stadium. In 52 years, no home team has ever been in their own game. At 7-2, we have a fighting chance that many people are excited about. In the 51 games that have been played, only 10 states have ever been honored to host the game. And 3 states, California, Florida, and Louisiana, have hosted 37 of the 51 games. So it's indeed an honor to be one of those 10 states, and now for the second time. We hosted Super Bowl 26 on January 26th of 1992. We have Super Bowl 52 in 2018, and if you're doing your math, I guess we have 2044 to look forward to. Maybe more importantly, and in the icons of the history of the Super Bowl, we had the last Super Bowl halftime show of its kind. The Super Bowl that followed us in 1993 had Michael Jackson. But the Super Bowl that we had Gloria Estefan, along with Brian Boitano and Dorothy Hamill skating around with snowflakes, bouncing around and dancing on the floor. I asked them why the Super Bowl had gone from the halftime from what it was to what it is, and as it would turn out, the broadcasters indicated that the Super Bowl halftime show provided a moment for people to tune out of the game as opposed to tune in, and that many of the people did not come back to watch the second half of the game. So they wanted the Super Bowl halftime show to be every bit as good as the show itself. But our story starts earlier. Our story goes back to 1960 when an expansion franchise was given to the state of Minnesota for the Minnesota Vikings. And our first year was played in 1961. It then fast forwards to the Wilf family on May 25th of 2005, taking ownership of this great franchise, making commitments that in fact they kept everyone and then some, and something that we're very proud of, which is why we have Mark here today. Our story proceeds to the stadium approval in May of 2012. We have a number of public leaders here, Kurt among them. We thank you for giving us that privilege on a pretty close vote, actually, that we have a new stadium announced in May of 2012. And that brings us up to May 21st of 2014, when we had the pleasure of going down to Atlanta to compete against New Orleans and Indianapolis to win Super Bowl 52. And our story then proceeds to now. You see, were it not for all those interventions, to have a team, to have a city and a state that supports it, to have an owner that's behind it, to have a political support to get the stadium done, and to have a business community excited to host the game, we wouldn't be talking about it at all this morning. Now, what's unique about our bid, among other things, was we went into the bid in Atlanta in May of 2014 with the knowledge that the majority of the business community of the state of Minnesota was supportive of the civic and economic benefits of a Super Bowl. To my knowledge, but for Maryland, not one single leader was around in the 26th Super Bowl. And as Doug and Marilyn and I approached each of the business leaders with not even a stadium build, it was a sketch, a schematic, we offered the idea that they could be sponsors of one of the biggest economic moments in the life of the state of Minnesota. And to the person, in fact, in the first two night meetings, 18 people put their hand in our hand with nothing more than a promise and said, I'm in. It's the right thing to do. And I want you to remember all of that because this is a publicly supported event with a privately funded outcome. Now, on February 6th of last year, in Houston, we were given the ball. Picture this. Commissioner Goodell's in the middle. You have the host committee from Houston standing there looking both ragged and relieved. And you have the eager beavers of Maureen Bausch and Doug Baker and Marilyn Carson and Richard Davis all ready to roll. And as the ball was handed to us, I looked across and I saw the faces of the Houston folks with this amazing relief on their face, like, oh, it's all yours. And from that day, we begun the 52 weeks leading up to Super Bowl 52. And so I want to make sure you're clear about a few things. This is a Minnesota event, not a Twin Cities event. This is a 52-week celebration leading up to the big game. This is going to be a 10-day festival like you've never seen in your life, a free festival where people can experience all the fun parts of this community and brag about it endlessly. It's important you know that we have both a hospitality function and a legacy function. The hospitality function, as simply put, is going to be the big parties and the big celebration. On Friday, January 26th at 4 p.m., we're going to open Ecolab Mall. It will be Super Bowl live for the next 10 days. Every night for those 10 days at 4:30-ish, when the sun sets, one of our Native American tribes will come with their children and their young people, and they will drum down the sun. Every single night on Ecolab Mall at 9 or 10 p.m. as we close down, there will be the last dance. Every single block on Ecolab Mall will be celebrating something special about Minnesota. Every single night will celebrate something unique about our state. All free, all inclusive. We expect over 1 million to 1.2 million people to join us from out of the state during that 10-day period. As we look at the legacy as important, the legacy is something that was built actually in the Super Bowl 26. So was the taste of the NFL. Our legacy this year is fun, fuel, and fundamentals. It's about the youth of our community. It's about teaching coaches to coach better and safely. It's about students approaching schools with a sense of safety and a sense of purpose. We've been adding breakfasts in many schools around the state because, as it turns out, the best meal isn't lunch, it's breakfast. And as you might appreciate, we're bringing breakfast carts into schools because some children are embarrassed to suggest that they need food. But when there's a cart outside the classroom, anybody can grab the food and be given nutrition before the day begins. It's pretty inspired. And we're doing it with an intent to teach people to fish forever. And then maybe as importantly, anti-human trafficking. We want to be known not for having really taken it to the next level and helping the awareness that everyone will have by the time the game approaches. But this would be the best of all legacies so that every future Super Bowl and every large event around this country from this point forward has better training, better awareness, and better sense of community to protect people from anti-human trafficking. So we have a lot more than maybe you thought. The panelists today will talk about the economic impact. It can be debated for as long as you'd like. It's probably $200 to $400 million net benefit to this community and this state because of the arrival of the Super Bowl. It doesn't really matter what the number is so much as the fact that we have the ability to showcase this wonderful community. Years ago when we started this bid, we sat down in a room and said, what should we even call ourselves? If we're going to make this bid, who are we? And I want to close with the Bold North. The first thought with the ad agency that we had hired was, let's use warm colors, reds and yellows and oranges, and let's warm up the place because it's going to be awfully cold. And we talked a little further and said, but cold is kind of who we are, it's what we do. And the person said, well, then you have to do it boldly. And honestly, like some of the greatest things ever, someone said, then that is what it is. It will be the Bold North. And the reason I'm closing there is because I want you to own this with all of the people that will be touched by this wonderful event. You see, on Sunday afternoon at the Xcel Energy Center, thank you, Craig, we had expected 9,000 of our 12,000 volunteers to arrive, ready to hear about their orientation to be ready to represent our state for that 10-day festival. At 2:30, when the doors opened, 3,000 were already gathered outside the doors of the Xcel Center. By the time we started, we had 12,000 people, standing room only in the Xcel Energy Center, And so we had more people than we have volunteers, and we're not exactly sure how that happened. To say their enthusiasm was overwhelming is an understatement. To tell you that they are as proud as you could ever be to represent a place that they call home would be incredible. And for you to realize that that was our first peak, with 81 days to go now, of the sheer warmth of this community. So the bold North will celebrate the cold because it's what we do. We want this to be so remarkable that people will come back on purpose in the winter because of how we do it. But there's no question in my mind, as evidenced on Sunday, with over 12,000 people ready to stand on the corners and in every skywalk to welcome people to our community, there's no question that the warmth will exude and melt any part of the snow that we might otherwise have. I want to thank Maureen Bausch, who's here at the head table. She hired on about 2.5 years ago. She and her team of 32 are putting this whole thing together with over 28 committees of 400 volunteers at the senior level, and as you know now, tens of thousands of people somehow touched. So Maureen, thank you for that leadership, and you too one day will hand off a game ball to Atlanta with that same look of relief. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this wouldn't have happened without the people behind it. I gave you the story, I gave you the history, and I want to give you the people, because the folks that are here today recognize their importance in this position, but to the person, I know them all, and they're here not to celebrate the game of the Super Bowl. They're to celebrate what communities can do when special things happen and what can happen after the game leaves. So I'm going to introduce each of you, and I'll have you come up at the end. Let me start with our owner, Mark Wilf. As I said, Mark and his brother, Ziggy, are the owners of the Minnesota Vikings, having taken over on May of 2005. In their role as the overseers, they oversee everything from planning to strategy to everything but player decisions in the final decision. They have three primary areas that I want you to hear about. I've known these for years, but this is a perfect opportunity for a group of senior leaders to hear. When they came here in 2005, they said, we have at least three key things we want for this community. One is to build a winning football team and bring a championship to Minnesota. Check. Providing best game day experience possible for the Vikings fans and positively impacting the community and the entire state of Minnesota. Check, check. The Wilf family have a foundation that has been giving in New York and in Minnesota and across the country for many, many years. It might be the part that I'm most proud of, getting to know this family and their charitable causes and how wonderful selfless they've been in this community as well. They also are part of the Garden Homes development. We're one of their bankers. They're one of the leading commercial real estate firms and have been for decades in the United States of America. Mark is a graduate of Princeton University, New York University School of Law. His wife, Jane, is a member of MIA and is part of the community as well. I've met all of their 4 children. They are wonderful young Wilfs. And Mark, we could not be more proud to have you be part of our community for all you've done for it and what you're doing for us now. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mark Wilf is one of our panelists. Our next panelist is a hometown hero. Those of you who know the Wild know Tod Leiweke. Tod Leiweke is the Chief Operating Officer of the NFL, a recent inductee in the NFL Leadership Hall of Fame, and an iconic leader in professional sports. He has, among many of his special recognitions, having led the Seahawks to their first franchise Super Bowl appearance in 2006, and then later the Tampa Bay Lightning at the NHL Stanley Cup Finals. Anything Tod touches kind of turns to gold, which is why we have him hanging out here as much as he can. He spent 5 years as the head of the Tampa Bay sports and entertainment activity. He was also doing the same thing when he was at the Seattle Seahawks in 2007 in charge of Vulcan Sports and Entertainment. Tod is clutch. As a co-chair of the Super Bowl committee, everything has a decision, and most of them can be made with ease and with the simplicity of getting the job done. But every once in a while, you need that clutch person to come through. Ladies and gentlemen, when the game is remarkable, and when the Vikings win on February 4th, 2018, there will be fewer people more responsible for the fact that the entire process for the entire Super Bowl 52 will have gone as well as it has, and Tod Leiweke will be top of my list because I know what he's doing and I know what he will do. So, ladies and gentlemen, having been with the Wild before that, having been a chief operating officer of the Minnesota Sports and Entertainment, and before that part of the PGA's First Tee, Vancouver Canucks, and the Golden State Warriors, he is Mr. Professional Sports. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Tod Leiweke back to Minnesota. And then our third panelist is Alexis Glick. Alexis is the CEO of GENYOUth Foundation. Alexis has been responsible for bringing youth into the Super Bowl activities now for many years. GENYOUth is a foundation that's dedicated to child's health and wellness, and it comports perfectly with our legacy programs, and in fact, she's helping us build some of those great programs I described. 73,000 schools are engaged and taught to fish by GENYOUth and by Alexis's leadership. You may recognize when she comes out, though, because she's much more public than the rest of the folks I've talked to. She was vice president for Fox Business News. She helped launch the largest cable network news in history and was anchor for the Money for Breakfast and for the Opening Bell. She's interviewed the likes of every politician and every single most important sports leader in probably the world. She currently serves on the board of directors of Cumulus Media, one of the largest operators of radio stations, and she's a senior fellow for the Kauffman Foundation. Frequent guest and contributor to network, cable, and TV news, but you may know her best as a correspondent for NBC Today Show, where she co-anchored the third hour of the program with Katie Couric, Matt Lauer, Al Roker, and Ann Curry, just to drop a few names. She went on to make a difference in the lives of the people that she used to report about. And so I'm proud to have an ex-banker from Morgan Stanley to join us here to talk about what can happen when commerce meets philanthropy, meets community. And ladies and gentlemen, Alexis Glick is that very person, and we're very proud to have her here, and I know the NFL is very honored to have her be a partner. Welcome to our wonderful state of Minnesota, Alexis Glick. Please come forward, and as you do, our panelist is going to be moderated by Doug Baker, perhaps Minnesota's favorite son. Doug is the chairman and CEO of Ecolab. He is the probably senior most ranking CEO in our community right now. If he hasn't won the award, he's about to. If they haven't named one for him, they're going to. Doug has this wonderful way of running one of America's greatest companies, but giving back the same sense of importance and the same sense of philanthropy to this community. And so, Doug, we're proud to have you at every place we do. I'm proud to be your co-chair along with Marilyn. And ladies and gentlemen, this is our panel. Doug, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Richard. You know, this is the first time I've moderated, which will become quite apparent here in about 5 minutes. Usually I'm one of the panelists, so I have all these evil thoughts of things that have happened to me as I've been in the seat, which I promise not to lay on all of you. So look, this is a fun event, and it's a great economic event, but I think we also have to keep in mind that it's a great way to drive, I think, attention to the state. It's a great opportunity to do a number of things. But I am also looking forward to just watching a great game with Minnesota in the lead as the seconds count down. That's on you, sir. But it'll be awesome. So anyway, we've got a great opportunity. So look, I'm going to open up with a couple of questions, and I'm going to start with Alexis. And so my quick story, I met Alexis last year. So one of the hellish responsibilities of being a co-chair of the Super Bowl is we had to go down and visit Houston to check it out for the Super Bowl. And so I got through that. The first assignment was we got on a bus and we're going to go look at some of the events that were going on. The first one we drove up to was an event for GENYOUth. Now I have to admit, I had no knowledge of GENYOUth. I'd never met Alexis. We walk in, they had taken over a bar, restaurant in Houston, and you walk in, and all of a sudden I see a lot of people I know. You start talking. I ran into a bunch of our customers. That was good. And then I meet Alexis. And so briefly and quickly, all of a sudden through this interchange, I'm like one of the founding sponsors I find myself in of GENYOUth. So suddenly I am now giving money to GENYOUth. I have since done even more homework, and I'm delighted with that decision. And so what I'd like to do is, one, warn you that if you meet Alexis, be very careful. You may end up sponsoring GENYOUth. But number two, what I'd love is to give you a platform to talk about what you do, your tie into the NFL, and thoughts you have about where GENYOUth can go and the difference you're making.
Well, it's just that you fell in love. And there we go. No, well, thank you. You know, we've been blessed at GENYOUth to partner with the National Football League, and I think the way you guys will probably recognize us most is when you see Play 60 on the field. That's us. Essentially, our goal every day, as Richard so eloquently put it, is to ensure that America's youth get access, not only and the opportunity and the right to be physically active for up to 60 minutes a day, but that they get the nourishment that they need to succeed. And we know for a fact that there's a direct correlation between a child who actually starts their day, in fact, with a healthy breakfast, as you noted, a child who's active for a minimum of 20 minutes a day, but up to 60 minutes a day, the consequences of which are outstanding performance in standardized test taking. They excel in mathematics. They do better in reading, higher graduation rates, better attendance. The list goes on and on. So we partnered with the league about 10 years ago, in fact, actually preceded the creation of the foundation, to really look at how could we build awareness, get out the vote, make people aware of the inequities that are going on across this country. And in doing so, we not only partnered with the league, we partnered with all 32 teams and have had an unbelievable partnership with the Minnesota Vikings. But the third component of that is we've partnered with the NFL players who on Tuesdays, when they have off across the nation, they are walking into the school building with us every single Tuesday across the nation to inspire kids. And we have just seen some of the most remarkable results. Just to give you two quick elements of that and how, as Richard said, I am a Wall Street kid who did spend a decade on Wall Street before going into media. And no one knows this better than you, but if we don't invest in this next generation and ensure that they have what they need to succeed, we call it time, talent, and treasure, we're all going to do ourselves a great disservice. So when we look at today, where we are, and what we've done over this past 10 years, we now reach 38 million kids across the United States. There's approximately 55 million across the country. And because of the work that we have done together, 14.5 million kids are eating better. They have access to the nutrition that they deserve, arguably a right in the school building. And 18 million kids are more physically active as a result of this program. So it's been a tremendous investment on the part of the NFL, ownership, the time and talent of the players, and folks like you and many in here who will get to know me better.
Exactly. That's great. And so you've had a partnership with the NFL, and Tod, you're here as COO of the NFL. Now, that sounds like one of the coolest jobs on earth. So what could possibly go wrong? So what's the best part of the job, and what are some of the challenges you face?
Okay, I will answer that question if you'll give me just 1 minute to say a couple of thank yous, because I spent enough time in Minnesota where Minnesota polite is top of the list. So I have to start by saying hi to my friends at the Minnesota Wild. Craig, thank you, Matt Maka. And I learned so much about my trade and my time here in Minnesota. I want to call out a company in Winona that is the second longest serving licensee in the history of the NFL, 50 years. Mr. Pope, you were here, 50 years in partnership with the NFL. Thank you so much, and we're so proud that a Minnesota company ranks that highly. I want to thank the host committee. Can you believe 12,000 people show up? The passion for this. We're going to have the best Super Bowl ever here, in large part because of the passion of that group. I want to thank the Wilfs. 12 years ago, they took on a franchise that needed a lot of love, care, passion, fortitude, and they've done all that. And the game on Sunday, 2 7-2 teams are going to battle it out. Mm-hmm. And this idea that he might host his own team in the Super Bowl is a real deal. So congratulations, sir. And I know I took longer than a minute, but I have to thank the fans, because I think per cap, the fans in Minnesota and the Twin Cities are the greatest sports fans in the world. Amen.
Amen.
Now, what was your question about a tough job?
Well, you got a pretty cool title.
Yeah.
And, growing up, you might imagine if somebody whispered in your ear, you know what's going to happen, Tod? You're going to end up to be COO of the NFL. Yeah. And, of course, glory and all the fun stuff would go through your head. So talk about that. What's really the privilege and what's the fun part? And then also talk a bit about the challenges and stuff we might not think about every day.
Well, I think, I was a team guy my whole career. So being at the league office a little bit is certainly different. Never imagined living in New York, and that's been enjoyable. But there's day in and day out incredible opportunities. But it's just a fantastic thing to also connect with all 32 teams and to travel America and see all that is great. And this weekend I'll travel to Mexico City, and we will take this great game and fill a stadium, and we will change lives down there as well. We're playing a game on a regular basis. The people of Mexico are so appreciative of us being there. And so that's the great part of the job. With that comes challenges. But I've always viewed, and if you work in team sports long enough, you have to view challenges as opportunities. So everything we're going through now, I view through the prism of these are opportunities for us to get better. Dialogue with our players, a chance to improve the league, a chance to improve relationships with fans. And so the opportunities to get better, there's not anything we at the NFL can't do and can't do at a higher level.
Great. Well, it's a great entree, Mark. So I would echo a number of the statements that Richard just made. I think the Wilfs have been unbelievable owners. And you guys made a commitment to the community when you got here. You asked for the community to co-invest in a major stadium, which we got through, and everybody, it was a big collective event. And since then, you've gone on, because I had the privilege of going to visit your new Egan site. You're my happy new neighbor. We have 90 acres and 500,000 square feet down in Egan. And let's just say we got trumped by the real estate guys. They have 200 acres and are building an unbelievable complex. Really significant development in this community over and above the stadium contribution that you've made. I mean, you guys are living up and standing up on every one of the commitments that you guys discussed when you asked for a co-commitment from the state. I just want to make sure everybody knows that, because this isn't a huge public site yet, but it's really unbelievable. So let's talk, ownership and everything else. And so I'll just throw it here. You guys somehow decided you wanted to be NFL franchise owners, and you live in New Jersey. So probably your first thought was that we got to own the Vikings. So right? How did the Vikings, how did that come about? What was the thought process as you guys were going through it and thinking about it? And then, as you go in and you buy a business, there's always happy surprises and not so happy. So, talk about that.
How much time do we have?
Yeah.
Well, first, before I get to that question, I'm going to also, as a point of privilege, I want to really thank the Economic Club for hosting this. I think the excitement about the Super Bowl, we're very proud of the fact to help the host committee, the public and private partners that we had, really a total team effort to bring this incredible event to Minnesota. So we couldn't be more excited. And I have to tell you, Richard and you, Doug, and Marilyn and Maureen and her team, I mean, you all have really an outstanding first-class leadership in this community. And you should know that, and we have enjoyed working together with them, and it's going to be a great event because of them and their team, so they really deserve that recognition.
Good job, man.
And I, too, want to mention the Wild and the other teams that are here, and good to see Craig here, and we like to think that we're part of the Minnesota sports community now, and we look forward to working together and doing more things in the future. So getting back to your question. The question was about ownership, and this has been quite a ride. 2005, really, we loved football growing up. This was our family bonding experience. My parents and my aunt and uncle were all Holocaust survivors. They were refugees that came to the United States, and they were anxious and urgently trying to have our family integrate into the American experience. And football was our family bonding experience. We went to New York Giant games as children growing up every Sunday. That was our bonding experience. So it was always a dream of ours for my brother, myself, my cousin, to be involved somehow in professional sports. And whether it was the Giants that we were rooting for or what have you, we knew when the Vikings opportunity came up, we were initially minority investors in the group, but we knew what a great franchise this was, the tremendous history, growing up myself in the 60s and 70s, to know what an incredible history they had, Bud Grant, the Purple People Eaters, the whole thing, and the passionate fan base. We knew that this was a great community for football, but to actually be in it now and to live it and to see it every Sunday is super exciting. So we're excited about our team. We're following Coach Zimmer's lead. We're all about this Sunday against the Rams. We're not looking 1 minute past it. And I think the approach we're trying to give as ownership is to give stability to this franchise. And we have a great team led by Kevin Warren, our COO, and our executive team, Lester Bagley, Steve LaCroix, Steve Poppin, just a fantastic team that we inherited when we bought the team. So there's a lot of good things going on here, but it's about next man up on the field, and we have a lot of good things in the community. But I want to thank everyone here today for your support of the Vikings, for your support of the community, and we do our part where we can. So I hope that answers your question a little bit.
You did answer my question. Excellent. So Tod, you know, you've got this job. The NFL has grown from really a small business into an incredible powerhouse. And as you think about the future and how you continue to develop the fans of the future, players of the future, et cetera, how's the NFL thinking about that long term? We all have to think about this in business.
Yeah, I mean, there's an enormous responsibility there. We all feel like we're stewards of the game. Player health and safety is a significant issue. And the owners have committed substantial resource to pioneering new ways for player health and safety. And they're things we're learning that will not only apply to the NFL, but will apply to all sorts of other industries. That's one way, is protecting the game. The other is growing fan base. And you know, the world is changing today faster than any time in my lifetime. We're literally going from coal to electricity in our lifetime here, and watching technology change our lives so much. And how do we stay contemporary with that? Broadcast television has been a great friend of the NFL, and we've been a great friend to it. And that's how we've grown the game to become the most popular sport in this country. But how do we stay on the cutting edge of that? Because today's millennial generation and the next generation behind them are not doing the things that I did or my dad did. So we've got to really be on the cutting edge, and that means having the courage to think about the game. You're seeing now the game actually being tightened up. We're looking at commercial inventory differently. The pace of the game is important. How we convey the game, how we send it out on digital, and so all those things are so important. But I'm confident with our ownership and our leadership that we're going to continue to be pioneers and get it figured out.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, every business you describe, sometimes I've heard it described, you know, I always call it doom's on the horizon. Our job's to keep pushing it off.
Yep.
Meaning almost every organization has got a life, and they are not eternal. And, you know, there's no like right of an organization to last forever, and it's the responsibility, whoever's leading it, to make sure that it lasts for another 30, 50, 70 years, right? It's almost the eternal deal. And I think those responsibilities are almost always the most powerful and most important ones that we all have.
Well, and I think this lady has given so much of her time to pioneer community giving, and I think that's been the backbone of the NFL, is making differences in communities. At the end of the day, only one team is going to win. And trust me, I've been to the Super Bowl, I've been to the NHL Finals. It is really disappointing to be the second team. I'm the only guy in the history of sports to lose that Super Bowl and the Stanley Cup Finals. Having said that, the journey, she's consoling me, I accept it. The journey along the way is the power of this whole thing. All of those people at the Xcel Energy Center, 12,000 people coming together as community, lives touched, that's really, and there'll be one champion, but along the way, millions of champions will be crowned just through the journey of the experience.
Yeah.
And you know, if I might add, I mean, I think for someone like me who's come from the business world and then spent a decade commenting on the intersection of the economy with politics, among other things, the thing that was most intriguing to me in going to work with them, which I now have done, it's almost 6 years ago, was that they, you know, it's about practicing what you preach, and it's the ability to actually take the bully pulpit and drive awareness. And when I think about the work that we've done here in Minnesota with the Vikings, you know, let me just give you a statistic that aligns with what he just said. The kids right now, ages 8 to 16 years old in a most recent survey, are not only carrying multiple devices, but they are on their device for over 40 hours a week. Okay, more than technically what is a full-time job, right? They're on their devices. Now let me add another statistic for you. In our school system in America right now, this doesn't rattle you, especially from the Wild all the way down to the Vikings and every one of you. We all grew up on PE, right? Well, in today's environment, only 4% of elementary school kids, 8% of middle school kids, and 3% of high school kids have daily PE. Now, that's a crisis in physical inactivity. So when he talks about how do we connect back with these kids, about showing them the beauty and the joy of the game, I said to Kevin Warren when I walked in, I said, I am absolutely captivated by Teddy Bridgewater. He inspires me every single day. And he doesn't just inspire the kids of Minnesota. His story getting out is inspiring millions and millions of kids across this country. Those are the kinds of stories that this league, these owners, these players are helping us bring to life. And to me, there is an economic consequence of that. Because what you're showing kids is that, you know what, there are critical inputs to success. There are critical inputs to graduation rates, to what your career opportunity is. In fact, we know that unemployment rates are much lower when we give the kids the resources that they need to succeed. So I would just say, it's interesting, this will be my 8th Super Bowl. The last 3 before I did this one, I did in broadcast television. And to see the impact that the Super Bowl has in that marketplace, the legacy commitment of not just what we're doing here around Super School Breakfast, but as Richard and Maureen and Wendy and so many others and Dana have committed these community grants, that's long-term sustainability. That's long-term change. And that's what this great bully pulpit is for, not just us, but for all of you to make that long-term change. So I just think it's remarkable, and I applaud you for being one of those lucky 10 to have it here, because it's a remarkable thing. And I go back to those cities. I see that change. It creates so much hope. It's remarkable.
Well, speaking of that, so Todd, you've also seen a number of Super Bowls. You've seen them done well. And what are the great benefits, and what are the steps communities do well to really leverage this? Because I think Alexis' point's exactly spot on. It's a weekend, it's a 10-day event. There's economic activity during those 10 days. Everybody likes that, but it's really the legacy afterwards.
Richard, I think Roger Goodell put that halftime together in 1992, so I'd be careful about disparaging that. But, you know, you're first. It's almost hard to convey the impact that this event is going to have in a short period of time on this community. This is going to be a postcard to the world. Journalists from literally all parts of the world will be here. And the U.S. alone will have 150 million people viewing the game. And so game time is where all the eyes come together, but in the weeks leading up, as you know, we will have, NBC alone will originate 100 different programs out of Minnesota. And they're going to tell the stories here. They're going to tell the stories of business, of community, of the quality of life. And I'm one that loves it here. But I think Minnesotans are almost too polite sometime to toot their own horn. We are going to do it for you. We're going to tell the world what a great place this is, what the quality of life is like. The giving spirit in this community. This is one of the most giving communities in all of America, one of the largest United Ways. It has all of those stories are going to be told. And then, by the way, we're going to play a game. And if last year's any indication, it'll be a spectacular sporting event.
Yeah, that's great. So, Mark, what's your view on this? Obviously, we know what you hope for. We're with you. We're all aligned. So, but how do you think about the Super Bowl coming up and
well, obviously what drives us every single day since we bought the franchise is number one is to bring a Super Bowl Lombardi trophy to the people of Minnesota and our fans. We have the best fans in the world, and we've gotten to witness that these past 13 seasons. And we view ourselves as kind of stewards of a really great franchise and legacy, but it is kind of, the journey is really building. The Super Bowl itself, just to see what Richard was talking about earlier, to have, we need 10,000 volunteers and over 30,000 signing up. I mean, this is very powerful. And the Excel Center the other day, to be filled with that kind of energy and passion, and to see how people are engaged in the community. And I think the most exciting is and this is one of our big goals as the team here, is community involvement. All of our active players, and we encourage this constantly, all 53 of our players on our roster do a Community Tuesday, do community events, and are out there doing incredible things. So what we're doing here with the Super Bowl committee, every week, 52 weeks of legacy, like you said, it's a long-lasting impact, it's a long-lasting legacy for us, so we're very proud to have played a part in that, and I just think it's a tremendous engine. But again, it drives us the most is being in that thing, but we got to beat the Rams first.
Yeah, one game at a time, right? Yeah. Well, I'm going to open it up to the audience, and I imagine there are some questions out there that you'd like to direct to one of the panelists. And so we have people walking around with microphones, so if you'd wait until the microphone is near you for your question. And I guess we have one over here on the left. Tommy?
Say, Doug, could you ask the panel, just with 1.1 million or more coming to Minnesota over 10 days, and then the fans that are here, and the stadium doesn't hold 500,000 people. So can the panel talk a little bit about those 10 days and what the Minnesota public that won't be able to go to the game and just watch it, what's going to be involved for the general public?
Well, I'll throw out a few things just as a Super Bowl host. I wish Maureen was here because we have the experts here. But it is a 10-day event, and I would say the highlight in the center part of this is going to be in downtown Minneapolis, where the Nicollet Mall will end up to be NFL Live. We'll have NFL Experience in the convention center. NFL Live is open to everybody. It's free. And every night it's going to be kicked off or ended with a free concert. And so this is a community event. It's not just the parties on the day and the parties the night before, but as we've seen as we've gone to these others, there are concert events every night. There are special events like Taste of the NFL, which originated here, as Richard mentioned, 26 years ago, which is going to be in St. Paul. We have kickoff parties in multiple cities around. I'm not going to give away. I'm not even sure what's public and not public at this point in time. But that's how you end up hosting 1.1 million people, because you're right. You're not going to get 1 million people, even as great as that stadium is. It's not going to hold it. And so that's how you end up having and attracting. But in terms of media, we're going to have over 5,000 media visit, and they're going to be here for 10 days. And you know what? They run out of standard stories. They start talking life experience stories, community stories, representing all that's so magical about this place. And when you start listing the top, the Minnesota's huge, great attributes, it's a long, long list, which we're going to make sure is great fodder for all the media people that are here so that they have things to write about and talk about that are both true, relevant, and of interest to everyone else and put us in a great light. But then I'll throw it over to others because there's a lot going on that week, and you can talk about the experiences you've had in other cities.
The thing I'm looking forward to the most is to see Tod Leiweke and Roger Goodell on snowmobiles. So I'll be waiting. I'll be waiting with
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
I think they're jumping the Mississippi. I think that's what we've got going.
Again, we should keep that away from Roger because he doesn't know that.
Yeah, okay.
I just want to say that the 10 days is going to be phenomenal. The entire region, the entire world is going to be able to see Minnesota in a unique light. And I think the way a community like here in Minnesota is going to take it on is different than the places, whether it's Miami or Arizona, that are used to kind of a resort kind of thing where there's always people coming all the time. In February, it's going to be a super boost for this economy to have it at that time. And it's not just the 10 days. Another legacy of this, and I see some of our public officials here and our speaker, I mean, we go back to the beginning of when we purchased the team. Part of this ride was also building an incredible facility, the economic development of downtown. I mean, this all didn't just come about by accident. When we started on the road, and Lester Bagley's here, and he preceded our ownership in this effort, and it was a very strenuous debate. But U.S. Bank Stadium, 8,000 jobs to create the 300 Minnesota companies involved in it, and since we opened a year and a half ago, 1.5 million visitors, thousands of tours. This is a constant economic effect. $1 billion of economic and real estate development around the stadium, totally recreating the east side of Minneapolis. So it's not just the 10 days, which are going to be incredible. but this entire ride has been a great boost. So like I said, we're excited to be part of it. We're going to have NFL experience at the convention center for all the youth, the Nicollet Mall, all those things, of course, leading up to the game, and some great night events too. So I'm looking forward to the whole thing.
Yeah, so great question, Tommy. Somebody else?
Up front.
Bunch of hands, yeah.
Well, I definitely see the all-star team of fabulous big Minnesota companies. And we are also known for one of the best entrepreneurial resources in the country. What opportunities do you have for smaller entrepreneurial companies to get involved?
Well, the impact of this should be felt far and wide. And if all this is about the big companies, but you know, we're going to have first the impact during the 10 days is prolific, but we've already believed there's an impact of people coming to town. My wife's here, by the way, and she's going to have her own unique impact during the Super Bowl week. And so if this is a celebration of this whole state. When we talked that week, 5,000 journalists coming to tell the story. They're from all over the world. This is the most powerful promotional tool in America, a Super Bowl. And we're going to tell the stories of not just the big companies and the obvious stories, but also the stories of the quality of life here, which is made up in this great entrepreneurial spirit that resides in Minnesota.
Yeah, and I want to hand Maureen, because there's also a specific tech event that we should highlight as well. So this is Maureen Bosch, the CEO of the committee.
I didn't expect to talk. We have quite a few opportunities for entrepreneurs. That's a great question. First of all, the biggest is our Business Connect program, which is a local and diverse business program that is an NFL program in every single Super Bowl market. We have 400 who have registered on that site and are getting business today and have been for over a year. And they are the first source for the NFL as well as us. There is a first and future tech competition, kind of like Shark Tank, that will happen at the Guthrie on Saturday morning. That's sponsored by Mayo Clinic. And the NFL owners will invest in several startups in the area of sports tech that morning. In fact, last year in Houston, a company from Rochester won it. So that's wonderful. And probably our biggest entrepreneur is Love Your Melon, who is supplying every one of our volunteers with hats with a reflective logo from our friends at 3M. So can't do any better than that.
That's great. Great question. Yes? Oh, it's over here? Okay, sorry.
If you can, talk a little bit about how big the stadium has played a role in rolling this out. You've addressed it a little bit, Mark, and the kind of a venue the partnership has made possible here in our state.
Well, again, I think for the state of Minnesota, the city of Minneapolis, to partner with us was really a very, very difficult process, but we got to a place where I think the NFL, our fellow owners, recognized that the state and city stepped up in a big way to support the NFL, and I think they recognize that, and they recognize what a great market the NFL is. And it's got ancillary effects, like I mentioned, all the effects. We have the Final Four coming up next year, concerts, X Games, all kinds of events that have evolved, the NCAA Wrestling Championship, whatever these events are, they're coming to Minnesota because we have an iconic venue. And we love the Metrodome, we loved TCF Stadium, but having our own home that's special. I think when we came in and bought the team, you didn't really see families. You didn't see children at the games. You didn't see quite the dynamic you see now. Now people want to come to the game. They want to be part of the experience. I truly believe, and I'm not just saying it because I'm saying it, but anyone that comes here, and I'm excited for people to come to the Super Bowl, anyone that comes here says, wow, you guys have the best stadium in the world by far. But people, I think it's the best kept secret still today, and I can't wait to have even more people be exposed to it in Super Bowl Sunday. the outdoor feeling you have inside. I'm sure most of you have been in our games, and thank you for the support. So it's just great all around for the community. It's great for economic development, and it's, like you see, an engine for all kinds of things.
That's great. I had the, I was an advocate for the stadium going in, and there was a great debate, and it's a legitimate debate because it's a significant public investment, and we're asking for the public to put up the money and pay for this. But if we were able to fast forward and stand where we stand today, then it would have been an easy sell. Because at the time, what was being promised was economic development in the east side of Minneapolis as a consequence of the stadium. We're talking about how this is going to be the people's stadium and not just for the NFL, but also used by a variety of community groups and associations, which it has. And also, I would say the follow-on investments that I referred to earlier that the Wilfs and the team are making in this community are huge. And so the economic impact is quite obvious now. It wasn't so obvious then. And it's also obvious to say if we hadn't built the stadium, we would not be talking about Super Bowl 52 in Minneapolis. That's for darn sure. So it was not going to come to the hump.
Well, and Doug, if I can, just quickly to thank you and Richard and the entire business community. From day one, they said, we need to have this. And I don't care how many countless chamber breakfasts or political meetings, they were steadfast in their support. They knew it was important for their companies, for their employees, and their steadfastness gave us the strength and to work with the public bodies to work together towards this. So I wanted to mention that.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yes?
Just a quick question. Some of the statistics you gave are a little alarming about our youth and their opportunities to access sports. I've been very fortunate. I think the sports that my children were able to participate in has greatly made a difference in their life in leadership skills, lifelong friends, and frankly, that care about their health. What, as a community, can we do partnering with organizations like yours and the NFL, the NHL, and others to make sure those opportunities continue?
Oh, well, God bless you for asking that question. Thank you so much. Because, as a mother, I'm a mother of 4 kids, too. Richard, you talked about his 4 kids, but not mine. Look, it's hard. I have to be really frank with you. It's hard not to be emotionally captivated and quite moved by what we're seeing and witnessing, both here, miles away, and across the nation. It's interesting. I'll briefly tell you, of the grants that we give, largely the grants that we give to schools are to help them improve the environment so that they get the resources for kids, whether it's the equipment they need to be physically active, or in the case of what we're doing here with the host committee, we sat down 2.5 years ago with Maureen and Dana and said, you know what, there's an issue in the state about increasing the average daily participation rate in breakfast. And we know it's the most important meal, and yet statewide, statistically, you were below the national average. And so we said, let's provide the equipment to make sure that breakfast is served not just to every kid, because usually the case is usually across the nation, 90+% of schools offer breakfast, but the participation rate as it relates to the lunch program is about 50% of that in breakfast. And sometimes it's because of busing, sometimes it's because of the location in the cafeteria or other issues, but oftentimes what the school needs is just essential equipment to change the delivery mechanism for breakfast from the cafeteria to the classroom, or to create a grab-and-go model so a kid who's being bussed in is able to have that breakfast. One other thing I'd say about that is, yes, we have 55 million kids in the school system. You have about 860,000 here in the state. But I'll tell you, there's over 13 million kids who are food insecure. So without that breakfast, for the average kid in the United States, their school lunch accounts for 50% of their average daily caloric intake. They need that breakfast. Imagine you going into a meeting and being able to function if maybe you're having lunch at 10 a.m. or in some schools you're having lunch at 2 p.m. and that's your only meal of the day. The second quick thing I'll just tell you, because I reminisce back to being actually in Atlanta at a convening with Arthur Blank and with Roger Goodell. We had a conversation coming out of this, and what Arthur had done is much like you guys have done here, is bring together all the leaders of sports, and we sat down and we had a conversation about what's working about sports and not. And we had a real strong gut check conversation about it, because Doug even said in advance of this, Alexis, youth participation in sports is declining. What's going on? I'll tell you, we recognized that. We saw youth participation declining. And what we said is, the kid is in the school building 180 days a year. What do we need to do? And so, in fact, we sat down 3+ years ago in Atlanta, and we started a dialogue that said, you know what? We could provide resources in the form of equipment for kids to play flag football. And I actually said to Roger, I said, Roger, when I was like 9 years old at recess, I loved to play flag football. Like, it was my favorite thing to do. He's like, Glick, you're not, serious. I'm like, no, it was my favorite thing to do. Today, after that initial conversation that sparked with Roger and Peter O'Reilly, who's putting on Super Bowl 52 with the NFL, we now have provided kits, flag football kits, to 13,000 schools in 3 years, and have 5 million kids playing the game. I tell you this because we have not been able to keep them in stock. The demand is so great for those resources. And the reason the demand is so great is because the average PE teacher in the United States, at the most, has $800 to provide equipment for, on average, 600 kids in a school building. So they have about $1 a kid. So if we can give them the equipment in the way the league and the ownership have helped us fund these kits into school buildings, I'd love to do that tenfold. And the second quick thing I just say is, the other issue is if we want to get more kids active, we've got to equip our educators. We've got to equip our PE teachers. So the other thing that we've done is we've trained 3,500 PE teachers. We'll train another 500, maybe 1,000 this fall with the Vikings and the other teams so that the coaches, the PE teachers actually know how the rules of the game work. So we got to give them the resources. We got to give them the support. And ultimately, I think the best way we can really address not only youth participation in sport, but in getting access to healthier foods is to give the schools the equipment and the resources they need. Thank you for asking.
That's a great. Well, we end where I began. Now you know why I left. That cocktail party,
all right,
as everything else.
I left Wall Street and media for this, yeah. But how could you not be compelled?
Exactly. So I'd just like to thank the panelists. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Tod, welcome home. We now know the story of losing the games, the championship games, why you relate so well to Minnesotans. Right? We've been there. So anyway, and Alexis is great, as always. Thank you very much for your time and all that you do for our youth. It's great.
The Economic Club of Minnesota's mission is to provide a world-class, nonpartisan forum for national and international leaders in business and public policy to discuss ideas that affect how Minnesota can better compete in the global economy. The Economic Club of Minnesota, engaging the world, strengthening Minnesota.